Hi, my name is Jean-Frédéric Morin. This presentation will introduce you to some preliminary findings from a novel dataset on the polycentric governance of outer space.
As you know, the Earth orbit can be described as a common pool resource. There is no central authority to coordinate who is doing what in outer space. And this creates collective action problems, such as the accumulation of space debris.
Scholars have well characterized this governance problem. There's a consensus in the literature that the existing multilateral institutions are insufficient. There's also a plethora of policy proposals on how to improve space governance. However, there is little empirical investigation on how the various space actors are actually collaborating to address their collective problems.
We often hear that there is a proliferation of space actors. But how many exactly? Who are they? Where are they from? What are they doing? SpaceX is clearly not a typical space actor. In fact, SpaceX might be the tree that is hiding the forest. So with this project, we want to look beyond those few trees that we always hear about to explore the entire ecosystem of space governance. An ecosystem that is made of various species of different actors interacting in complex and in fascinating ways.
Dr. Ethan Tepper and I put together a team of research assistants, and together we used several techniques to collect data on the space governance ecosystem. We tapped into existing databases, we contacted hundreds of different people around the world, including space agencies, archive centers, and governmental ministries, and we submitted applications under the Freedom of Information Act of various countries. Perhaps you even received a survey from us that looked just like this. So far, we have identified 1,500 different space actors. We consider as a space actor any organization that designs, owns, launches, operates, tracks, monitors, regulates objects in space, or has concrete plans to do so in the next 3 years.
As you can see here, there are a growing number of space actors. The last decade in particular has seen a rapid proliferation of them. However, the growth rate from 1960 to 2010 was already quite impressive. And this is something perhaps that the current literature on new space is overlooking. To me, this figure is equally interesting. This is the cumulative number of countries where space actors are located. There are more countries in this figure than there are current UN members, and that's because a number of those countries like East Germany and the Soviet Union ceased to exist, but they are in our dataset nevertheless. But as you can see, the sharpest rise occurred in the 90s, right after the Cold War, not in the last decade. But overall, the growth rate is quite constant over time. In terms of types of actors, there's a clear shift from public to private. In the 60s, most space actors were governmental actors or universities. And today, the vast majority of space actors are for-profit organizations. But what is often underappreciated is that this shift from public to private started already back in the 70s. This is the distribution of space actors per field of activity. Several space actors own, operate, and design space objects, and relatively few actors track or regulate them. This is their distribution in sectors or industries. Remote sensing, telecom, in-space research are dominant. And even though space tourism and space mining are attracting a lot of attention in the media, they remain quite marginal sectors. Space actors have impressive resources. As you can see here, many of them have a budget over $50 million per year. Also, many of them have more than 500 employees. This is particularly impressive, considering that the vast majority of space actors are entirely devoted to their space activities. This was not the case in the 60s. At that time, several space actors were actually multi-industry actors, and space was just one of their fields of activity. But these multi-industry actors are increasingly rare in space governance today. Because an increasing share of space actors are specialized in their space activities, and because an increasing share of space actors are private actors, the average size of new space actors measured in terms of budget or number of employees, is actually decreasing. And it has been the case for the last 50 years. We also looked at the arrangements that these space actors have concluded together. By arrangement, I mean any agreement that was voluntarily concluded by at least two space actors. It does not include domestic laws and regulations because those are not voluntary, and it does not include most types of private contract because they are confidential and difficult to track.
Nevertheless, we have identified more than 1,000 different arrangements. They are very diverse. They include share guidelines, information sharing platforms, memorandums of understanding, political declarations, resolutions, codes of conduct, and industry standards. And we find new ones every week.
There has been an explosion of arrangements in the last decade. Actually, the acceleration in the number of new arrangements is much more impressive than the multiplication of new space actors. The vast majority of these arrangements are bilateral. That's why many of them go unnoticed, and individually, they might not be so critical, but collectively, these individual arrangements create something that is greater than their sum, a real governance system. What is remarkable is that this emerging governance system is not limited to high-income countries. An increasing share of arrangements includes space actors from developing countries. Today, most international arrangements governing space don't even include one space actor, public or private, from the United States. As a result, arrangements are uniting space actors that are quite heterogeneous. There are different ways to measure heterogeneity. This is just one of them, based on the difference between countries with the highest and smallest GDP, from which signatory to a new arrangements are from. As you can see, in the 60s, most arrangements were concluded among actors coming from countries with similar GDP level. And today, even though several developing countries are catching up in terms of GDP level, there's more variation among countries to new space arrangements. These are just some preliminary results. We're still in the first steps of this research project. We're currently analyzing the text of the arrangements that we have collected.
We're interested in several design features of space arrangements. These design features include rules to share data and information, communication channels to engage with non-members, procedures to update and amend the arrangements, and mechanisms to settle disputes. Our research assistants are currently using the software NVivo to look for these design features in all the arrangements that we have collected. And we hope to find out how innovative solutions to collective action problems, such as space debris, arise and diffuse in the system. Then we will use network analysis to map the emergence of the space governance system. We're looking for signs of an emerging polycentric network that incrementally self-organizes to manage the Earth orbit sustainably.
We're hoping to make our list of space actors and arrangements public as soon as possible, but we still have some work to do.
When our dataset is ready to share, we will post it on this website.
In the meantime, if you'd like to collaborate, just contact us. Perhaps you have research questions in mind or ideas on how to exploit this dataset that we have not even considered. In the next few months, we will also conduct interviews because we're interested in the perspective of space actors themselves. So, if you have experience in this field, whether it's in the public or in the private sector, and if you are willing to share your thoughts, we want to learn from you. Just contact us.